Hola chicos y chicas, ¿cómo estáis? This video is about el imperfecto, the imperfect. So I would like to tell you today about the three uses of the imperfect and also how to translate it. I'm going to show a presentation with you, and also at the end of this video, I'm going to show you my YouTube channel in case you are interested in watching stories told by me using this tense, the imperfect. So the first thing to do is I'm going to show you my presentation, and I will talk you through. Let's find it. Vamos a ver. Y empezamos. Empezamos nuestra presentación. El imperfecto. The imperfect. When to use it? That is the first question. When to use the imperfect? And here is the answer. You can use the imperfect in three cases. Case number one, habits and routines in the past. Case number two, descriptions in the past. And case number three, set the scene when telling a story. Let's look at one at a time. First case, habits and routines in the past. So if you're going to tell me about your childhood, your teenage years, you're going to tell me about the things you did when you were younger, and you're going to talk about habits, routines, this is the tense to use. For example, de adolescente, Cecilio se levantaba muy tarde. As a teenager, Cecilio used to get up very late. I'm going to read a few more examples of this particular use. When I teach, I usually write stories for my students. And at the end of the video, I'm going to show you where to find these stories. This is a story I wrote, and it's called La Niñez de Gloria, Gloria's childhood. And the first sentence is, Gloria se levantaba a las 6 de la mañana. Gloria used to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning. And then, of course, this example comes from the second story called La Adolescencia de Cecilio. Then I wrote another story, and it's called La Juventud de Antonia, Antonia's youth. And it starts like this. Antonia trabajaba en una fábrica de ropa. Antonia used to work in a clothes factory. So this is the first use. Let's move on now to the second use. And the second use is descriptions in the past. The typical situations that you see in books is, let's talk about your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your great-aunt, your childhood home. But that is all true. But it could be that you're asked to describe someone who was involved in something yesterday. And even for a description of yesterday, you still use these tense. Look at the example. La casa era grande y estaba en una esquina. The house was big and was on a corner. As I said, I have found over the years that the best way to teach these things is through stories. and I've written suitable stories. I wrote a story called La Señorita Gutiérrez, Miss Gutiérrez, and it starts like this. La señorita Gutiérrez tenía el cabello largo y negro. So I'm describing Miss Gutiérrez. And I'm saying tenía el cabello largo y negro. And as you can see, the verb tener is in the imperfect. Tenía, because a description. Another example, and this comes from another story called Juan Pablo y Esmeralda. Now, this is not my creation. This comes from a very famous soap opera in Latin America, and the name of the soap opera was Esmeralda. And I'm describing here the main two characters. So I'm saying here, Juan Pablo era alto, guapo, pero un poco arrogante. So Juan Pablo was tall, good looking, but a bit arrogant. Esmeralda era una chica pobre. Esmeralda was a poor girl. The verbs again are in the imperfect. Era, because they are descriptions. Let's move on to the third case. And this is to set the scene in a story. The imperfect is the tense that we use in Spanish to set the scene. It's a very important tense for storytelling. Look at this. Era una hermosa tarde. Antonio caminaba por el Parque del Retiro. It was a beautiful afternoon. Antonio was walking through Retiro Park. And for this, I would like to read you another story that I wrote. And everything, all the setting of the scene, as I call it, is in the imperfect. This is called Verónica en el bosque. Verónica in the woods. Let me read it first, and then I'm going to point out the verbs all in the imperfect. And I think probably I will translate as I go along so you know what's going on. So, era una mañana de agosto. It was a morning in August. Verónica estaba en el bosque. Verónica was in the woods. Hacía viento. It was windy. Mucho viento. Very windy. But it wasn't cold. Pero no hacía frío. Hacía un poco de sol. It was a bit sunny. Verónica recogía zarzamoras. Verónica was picking, what are these zarzamoras? Blackberries. Para su madre, for her mother. En el cielo había nubes blancas. In the sky, you could see white clouds. De pronto, now, suddenly, now, when you hear things like de pronto, de repente, cuando something is going to happen, the tense will change from imperfecto to indefinido, but that is going to be the subject of a different video. So that is all for this part. We can use the imperfecto or the imperfect in three cases, as I've just mentioned. The other question is, and probably you've been noticing by now, how to translate the imperfect is not always the same. It's not like, I think the indefinido is easy because the indefinido is a simple past, okay? Just, for example, Yo trabajé is worked, and that's it. Or Maria lo miró. Maria looked at him. But as you'll notice, and will be evident in a minute, the imperfecto doesn't have just one translation from Spanish to English or English to Spanish. Let's see how to translate it. And the answer is, it depends on the use. Use number one. If it is a habit or a routine, it is translated as used to. De adolescente, Juan jugaba en la calle con sus amigos. As a teenager, Juan used to play in the street with his friends. So that is the first equivalence if you want to, because in English, when we want to talk about routines in the past, we use used to. In Spanish, is el imperfecto. Jugaba, caminaba, comía, no comía, etc. Second case. The second case is a description in the past. And this is an interesting one because when it comes to descriptions in the past, in Spanish, we use el imperfecto, the imperfect. In English, you use the simple past. This is what I call a mismatch. But our brain is a wonderful machine. Our brain is like a computer. We need to just put the right chip and it will work, okay? Or maybe these days an algorithm. It will work. So you need to trust your brain. And of course, we need to practice. That's why I tell stories to put the grammar in context. Grammar is good. Grammar is useful, but it has to be in context. In a given context, grammar makes sense. It's not just about memorizing endings. Okay, this is just me. Of my soapbox. Back to the lesson. As I said, this is a mismatch. In Spanish, imperfecto. In English, simple past. Look at this example. In Spanish, we're saying, Carlos era alto. Era is imperfecto. In English, you would say, Carlos was tall. Was is simple past. Another example. La casa tenía un jardín muy grande. Tenía is the imperfect form of the verb tener, whereas had is just simple past. The house had a big garden. Próximo caso, the next. When you set in the scene in story, is translated as past continuous. That is true. So here, in Spanish, we say, ella caminaba por la calle. Caminaba is imperfecto. In English, you say she was walking along the street. Was walking is past continuous. Another mismatch, another chip that we need to put in our computer that we have here. And that is all for now. But before we finish, I am going to show you where to find the stories I've been talking about. Because, as I said before, I think that stories are a wonderful tool to teach grammar in context. So I'm going to show you my YouTube channel, and I'm going to show you where to find these stories. And here they are. These are the stories. So this is my YouTube channel. It's called Español con Jorge Ulloa, as you can see here, Español con Jorge Ulloa. I have over 300 videos, and I have stories. Look at them. So here I've got La adolescencia de Cecilio. So you will see this grammar in action, so to speak. So here you're going to hear things like Cecilio tenía pocos amigos durante su adolescencia, veía televisión en el salón de la casa. Another story is La Juventud de Antonia. It's the same, routines in the past. María Jesús also practiced routines in the past. Juan Pablo y Esmeralda, when I wrote Juan Pablo y Esmeralda, based on a soap, of course, I was thinking about the other function, the other use, the use of descriptions. So I spent time describing Juan Pablo and describing Esmeralda. Pedro en el Parque Stanley is the other use, is the setting the scene. María en los jardines italianos is setting the scene. Verónica is setting the scene. Los recuerdos de Ricardo is, again, back to nostalgia. They used to, back to habits and routines in the past. La señorita Gutiérrez is mainly description in the past. La casa de José Rodríguez is a description in the past. And then I decided to do La Niñez de Gloria for the second time because the first time I did it, it was a long time ago. Actually, it was during the pandemic and I couldn't get hold of a good camera. Okay, so this is me now here telling you the story of the adolescencia de Cecilio. Let's listen to it. Spanish. Listen carefully. La adolescencia de Cecilio. Cecilio tenía pocos amigos durante su adolescencia. No tenía novia. Él era tímido y callado. No salía mucho y hacía ejercicio. So give it a go. Listen to it. My students find it very useful. I hope you do too. So ahora, para terminar, voy a hablar en español, porque necesito que os acostumbréis a escuchar español hablado por un hablante nativo, ¿sí? Es bueno para vosotros. Sin embargo, estoy cansado, tengo la garganta seca, voy a beber un poquito de agua y voy a deciros adiós. Un abrazo desde Blackpool. Nos vemos. Adiós, adiós, adiós. Adiós.